What I would ask you is, so the Muslims, when I was talking to them, they said there's, they try to give me two proofs that Islam is the truth. So like objective proofs. So what would be the objective proofs that, because what you've said is from within the context of Christianity.
Yes.
Are there any sort of things from an external perspective that would show that Catholicism is the truth?
Okay, my initial discussions with you when it was light was that I looked at it as an historical set of documents, the New Testament documents, and the growth of the early church in those New Testament documents and in subsequent documents, which showed the generalised belief that Jesus had died and risen from the dead. So this, if it were not a miraculous event, would be accepted by historians because it's testified to so widely and so early.
I mean, they would say that the person of Jesus is accepted as a historical figure, but about the resurrection, that's disputed. But then you raise the point, well, why would they lie about such an event? They had nothing to gain politically or
economically.
Which is an interesting point, and actually something I'm still considering, because I've heard other people use that argument.
And there were plenty to arrest and torture to extract confessions from.
Because the story that appears in the Bible, it says that when the Roman soldiers discovered the stone had been moved, they went to Pontius Pilate, and Pontius Pilate, I think it says that he gave the soldiers money so that they would say that his disciples came and took the body away.
The only difference is it wasn't them, it was the temple priest. There were temple guards, they went to the temple priest, told them what's happened, and they then bribed them to keep quiet about it.
The Roman soldiers?
No, I don't think they were Roman soldiers. I think they were, it doesn't say. But because they went to the temple priests first, they must have been temple guards, because after all, a Roman soldier does not go to a foreign power when something's happened. He goes to his commanding officer, because execution of these guys, and at least severe whipping, was the consequence of failing to obey orders, failing to carry out orders. And so they wouldn't have been Roman soldiers.
No, you're right. It was the chief priests, I think.
Yeah, they did go to them.
They said, lest this rumour spread among the people.
That's right. And in fact, Roman soldiers couldn't care less whether the rumour would spread. They're not Jews. So it must have been temple guards going to the temple priests. Notwithstanding that, we have no attestation in an early document from a person who calls himself a Christian that Jesus did not die on the cross and did not rise from the dead. And that's a fascinating thing as well. There should be sects of Christians who didn't believe in the resurrection.
Are there not any?
Well, no. Well, what can you say? All you can say on an historical analysis is that the early documents are of Christians, all of whom believe in the resurrection. Now, there's not a uniform belief that Jesus is God Almighty, as we Catholics say. But there's a uniform belief that Jesus is more than a man. So the spectrum of belief. That's it. The spectrum of belief is from super being, like the Gnostics have this idea of eons and emanations. He will be an eon from the great God who began these emanations, up to that he is God Almighty himself. But not saying he's merely a man. There is a citation of a group called Nazarenes and Ebionites, and I would say, they are the only ones that would go against that early spectrum of beliefs. But the Ebionites, the Muslims often say, the Ebionites were early Muslims. But actually, the Ebionites believed in the resurrection. They celebrated it. It's in Eusebius. And they also believed that that Jesus was born of a natural sexual act with a man. And that's contrary to the Surah Miriam in Islam. So these Ebionites weren't Muslims. The detailed Nazarenes, there's not much to say about them in the writings of the early fathers. We only know anything of these guys from the early fathers, and we don't know when these Ebionites and Nazarenes existed really. Just looking at the early fathers, that they encounter them, but we don't know when they began. So there's really nothing apart from that small bit of evidence that there was a sect around believing in Jesus being, other than a man. Or just Jesus being only a man. So that's the historical data.